Okay, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen.
Go ahead.
And there we go. So share. Okay. Um, I've okay, there we go. So yeah, I'm a hobbyist. I am Ohio certified volunteer naturalist. But I do tend to help with butterflies in the classrooms and also at one of the metro parks during the summer months on that situation. Um, but one of the things I've gotten into recently beyond the monarchs has been raising some of the giant silk moth caterpillars. And so I wanted to have an opportunity for teachers who are in the classroom to be able to have a choice besides monarchs. And let's see, there we go. So we all know that everybody had the monarch butterfly that they could do for the life cycle. It was real nice for the kindergarten teachers because 30 days, you'd have a butterfly. And I know a lot of people like to plant milkweed and raise them, especially for the ones that are going to fly down to Mexico. The good news is that this year's winter count was a little bit bigger than last year's, which had been low. But it's one of those ones that the good news is that it's a little bit bigger. So that's always a nice part. Now, something else that teachers may have done was order the painted lady butterfly kits from home for them. A lot of the kindergarten teachers do that because they don't have to worry about finding milkweed. But if you look at that, those caterpillars are eating a little fake diet. So you don't have to get them food, but it really doesn't mimic what you're going to end up seeing in nature. So one of the things that we often tell people is that if you've got milkweed and you look and all of a sudden you see all these veins on the milkweed, if you turn it over, you're going to see all these little white caterpillars that are just eating machines. And those belong to the milkweed tussock moth caterpillars. And so that's one of those ones where that's something that the teachers, since they've already got milkweed, they can go ahead and look at trying to raise those at all. Now, they do change colors. I jokingly call these the tri-colored rough coat guinea pigs of the moth world. But they do eat the milkweed or dogbane leaves. They keep well in the critter keepers. I do tell people to handle them carefully because the hairs will irritate the skin. It just makes you get itchy. So I normally would wear gloves or I would pick up the leaves and not touch the caterpillars with that. So, but they're fun little guys to raise. And so it gives the kids a chance to extend what else is in the ecosystem beyond just the monarchs on the milkweed. These are going to make a cocoon, and that's another difference that the kids should hopefully be able to learn. It's the difference between the cocoon and the chrysalis, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. But this is basically what it'll look like, and then you can kind of keep it in a cool place, and then it may close that fall or it may close in the spring. And this is what it turns into. So there's the adult milkweed tussock moth on that. And it's kind of pretty when it opens its wings. Some quick information. Moths and butterflies are in the insect order Lepidoptera. They both serve real important roles as part of the ecosystem and also as part of the food chain. So besides them being pretty and nice ambassadors, they really do have a very important purpose in nature. Author and entomologist Doug Tallamy. And if you guys are familiar with Bringing Nature Home, he wrote a book on that. He estimates it takes 6,000 to 9,000 caterpillars to raise a single brood of chickadees. And they may have a couple broods during the summertime. So that is a heck of a lot of insects that those birds have to collect to feed their little babies. So anytime we can manage to provide something that's going to support having caterpillars to help with that, it's going to help not only butterflies and moths, but it's also going to help our songbirds. So a couple differences. Most moths make cocoons. So the difference is the caterpillar actually takes silk under its mouth and it kind of spins a silk around its inside, its body, and it stays on the inside. And then on the inside, it's going to pupate inside there. So you actually will not normally see the pupa for a moth. There's a few ones that actually can bury themselves in the dirt to pupate, and they don't make the silk cocoon. But I also tell the people that Eric Carlisle with the Very Hungry Caterpillar, he got it wrong. A butterfly forms a chrysalis, not a cocoon. So if I were a teacher, I wish he'd put a little asterisk and just sit there and say it's easier for a second grader to read cocoon than it is chrysalis. But officially, chrysalis is the actual pupa, whereas a cocoon is a sleeping bag that covers the pupa. Some anatomical differences between it. When you look at the end of the antennae on the butterflies, they have these little tiny club shapes. Whereas when you look at the moths, it almost looks like a old-fashioned TV antenna. So you can have real feathery ones on the males, and the girls will still have lightly feathers, but they'll be more narrow than the males are going to be. The girls don't really need a huge antenna because they normally will just hike out on a tree, hang out on a tree. And the males are the ones that end up traveling hundreds of miles, well, not hundreds of miles, but hundreds of feet or a couple miles to be able to find the different females. Normally, when you have a butterfly at rest, they're normally going to rest with their wings flat against each other. That helps them be less noticeable. And then moths tend to rest with their wings spread open. So those are one of the differences. This is a Io moth on the right. One of its defensive strategies is to have those eye spots. So it'll open its wings, and those eye spots are meant to scare away predators so that they won't be eaten. The bodies for butterflies are sleeker in shape and are less hairy, but moth's body are heavier and hairier. Most of the time, butterflies are active during the daytime. They're diurnal, and moths are active at nighttime. They're nocturnal. One of the ones that's a little different is called the hummingbird moth or the clearwing moth. And that's one, if you're lucky to see them around, they're really kind of fascinating. So how and where do I find eggs to raise? So that's a situation. So here we have a female hanging out on a tree. And like I said, hopefully, if you walk through the woods, you might be able to find them on there. But it's a hit and miss kind of thing. So mothers, people who like to study moths, they'll watch for opportunities. They're going to stay on the tree. They're going to track the males using pheromones. At that point, the person who's the enthusiast is going to collect the females, and they're actually going to put her in a paper bag, and she's going to deposit her eggs. And then, depending on the species, you may have to wait a week to 14 days to see if the eggs hatch. Now, you've got people who raise them, they'll collect them, and they'll keep the cocoons over winter. So when the moths close, you release the males, and the females will actually, they'll have a cube that's about 10 inches by 10 inches by 10 inches that's made out of 1/2-inch hardware cloth. And they'll actually put the female in that cage, and they'll hang it out under a patio. And the males can come up and they can breed through the mesh habitat. And then if you've seen a successful pairing, then you would put the female in the paper bag to make the egg collection easier. I also have a friend who has one of the great big tall mesh habitats. She puts the female in there and leaves it unzipped, and then the male can enter in, and then they can go and mate and hopefully leave us eggs. This actually is the eggs from this year. So I'm going to go up to hers and find, get a couple to be able to raise with those. So we just have to wait to see whether or not they're going to hatch. But like I said, they're only about maybe 1/8 of an inch in diameter. So they're not terribly big eggs. The different ones will have different colors, but they tend to have a disc with a little dent in the middle. So it almost looks like the shape of a red blood cell. Facebook is where I usually get people to have a chance to find stuff. So right now, one of my friends who does the leaves for wildlife, she just posted that she has these Luna's eggs to share. And so the people who are on Facebook will sit there and go, okay, I'd like some, and they'll meet her. There's times where when she has caterpillars, she'll take them off to some of her little where they'll have the plants where they take them to different places for a plant sale, and she'll take them. And she usually gets people they're gone by 10 o'clock. So it's one of those ones that you've got a lot of people interested in raising these guys. So if you have some sweet gum trees, then you might be willing to try one of the giant silk moth caterpillars. And they're fascinating to do, to raise, but they're way different than the monarch caterpillars on the lane. So this is a Luna moth caterpillar, and it's eating sweet gum tree. Unlike other butterflies and things, the giant silk moth actually has to get all of its nutrition as a caterpillar. When they come out as an adult, they don't even have mouth parts, so they do not eat. They only live about 5 to 7 days. Their whole purpose is to mate, lay eggs, and then their life is over.
My.
So this is the Luna that came out last Thursday, and you can see how big and fuzzy her belly is. And there she is in the mesh habitat. I leave them on my covered porch so that they don't get too warm in the garage, because if you have them where they get too warm, they'll be closed early. But the Lunas seem to be the first giant moths that are coming out right now. The male antenna, as I said, are a lot wider because they have to pick up the pheromones that the female's sending out. But the females still have those little antennas, but they're just not as big. So they don't have to worry as much. And she'll normally just hang on a tree and let the males come to her. She's like, I do not need to go on a date. You come to me. Here's another picture from Chris Anderson. He's on the Facebook group Lepidoptera Rearing 101, Ohio. He's one of the ones where he'll post. And what'll happen is these Luna moths or the other ones, they can lay over 100 eggs. So you'll see people going and posting, okay, I've got caterpillars and eggs to share, because it's one of those ones that you want a few, but you don't want all of them. And the other thing is sometimes you want to share them so that you end up with some biodiversity, so that you don't have brothers and sisters mating. So often you hold your females in the cage, but you'll release the males out to find other females in the area. When you're going to feed them, then you're going to have different options. So this is one little caterpillar that I found at the same time when I was collecting oak leaves for my polyphemus last year. So that's kind of interesting. So this is a white marked tussock moth caterpillar. So what I did with that is I volunteer at the high school with the biology and ecology classes. And so I take them in so that they can get some different exposures beyond the monarchs and the black swallowtails that you normally see. So if you have to feed them, one thing you might do is go for a leaf run. So if you run out of leaves, you know where the trees are, where you can find them. You'll cut them. You're going to put them in water in a container with rocks to weigh it down. You do need to block the top of it because the caterpillars are going to climb down and drown in the water. They're little sneaky guys, and there's times where they're pretty big, but because they're so squishy, they can squeeze down. So that's something we always have to be careful with on making it sealed well enough so that the caterpillars don't go in. This is a baby bottle trick that I learned. If you take a baby bottle and you cut a hole a little bit bigger than what was in the baby bottle, then when you put it in upside down, you can actually stick the stem down into it. And then you've got a way to keep water on the leaves so they can stay fresh, but it limits the caterpillars being able to go down and drown themselves. That also works with milkweed for the monarchs, and it also works for parsley for the black swallowtails. Here's a Cecropia feeding on cut button bush leaves. So the Cecropia you can see is a little bit different. They've got these brightly colored knobs on it. And the Luna may have 2 or 3 generations in a season. The Cecropia normally only has 1 generation in the season. It'll make its cocoon, but the Lunas may end up having a couple in the season. I do not know why I'm getting this blue mark on it. Something happened there. Another option is to get sleeves that fit over the tree branches and tie off to keep the caterpillars inside. That way they're protected from predators inside the sleeves. You do have to make sure you tie the ends tightly because I've come back and I thought I had it tight, and then I'm seeing these caterpillars outside on other leaves, and then I'm watching this wasp attack the caterpillar because it's still part of a food chain. So you really do have to tie them off.
Wow.
So this is an example of the ties that you would put on. So that's about 24 inches long. And you would tie that. Actually, when you pull it tight, then you kind of wrap it around and tie it super tight to be able to get that done. This is a 5-gallon paint strainer. So this is often what I would tell teachers if they want a inexpensive way to have a sleeve to trap things on the end of a branch. You can get these, and like I said, that costs like $5 for 3. So here's what they look like. So on the bottom here, this is a regular paint strainer, so that you would just slide over the branch, and then you'd use a twisty tie or a string to tie it so that you've got the leaves with the caterpillars trapped so that they stay there and don't wander off. Part of the problem, though, is getting the caterpillars in. So sometimes what I do is I've modified them where I've sewed a little zipper so I can put it over the branch, and then I can unzip it, and then I can add or remove the caterpillars a lot easier with that. If you've got live plants that are in bush and like 5-gallon potted plants, you can get big habitats that you can put on them. Whenever I can, I prefer to let them eat on live live plants. The leaves stay fresher. I don't have to worry about them as much. So it's one of those ones where if I can have live plants, then I either have them in a mesh habitat or I put the zipper sleeves over them. So here's an example where I've got the zipper. So this could go over the tree, and then I can tie it down on the bottom, or I can put the zipper down at the bottom and then I can tie it up at the top, but that lets me be able to get the caterpillars in easier. Actually, what I've been looking at is using and creating a purse zipper where it has 2 zippers that go so it can meet in the middle. And that's what I'm going to be doing to go and make it easier to use with the different trees. These are the large habitats that you can get that would hold the potted trees. So you can get them from 36 inches to 5 feet tall. They can be pricey. So there's just times where a lot of teachers, I see if they can write grants to be able to get those. Here's a picture of a Cecropia. So you can see he's almost 3 inches long, but you can see he's there hanging out on a tree branch, and he'll just crawl back and forth between all the different branches, finding new leaves to be able to munch on. Occasionally you want to mist leaves in hot weather. Not too much, but they actually will drink the mist. That's similar to the dew that the caterpillars would find in the morning. But you have to be careful because if you miss too much, especially at the end of the season in the fall, you can get some mold growing on there. This is a Polyphemus moth. That's another one of the giant silk moths. This one, I was walking across my yard last year, and I saw her laying right there in the yard. I recognized her. I picked her up, and I took her over to Craig, who is with Blendon Woods. He's one of the naturalists. And so he put her out, and we got some eggs from her. So like I said, sometimes it's just luck, or you're walking by. He actually found one on the side of a Taco Bell restaurant, and he recognized it. So he grabbed it, brought it home, or brought it back, put it in a paper bag, and we got eggs from that one. This is a Polyphemus caterpillars, and this is on oak. Once again, they're very big. They look similar to Lunas, but the Lunas actually will have this little side streak that runs through them. When they're eating, you can actually hear them crunching on the leaves, and you can hear their frass, which is what you call caterpillar poop. You can hear it dropping. And every year, once we get caterpillars, like 2 years ago, we kept a lot of the caterpillars in the butterfly tent, and we were going and cutting down branches to feed them like almost twice a day at the end. So last year I went to Craig and I said, how many do we want to raise? I said, let's set our limit and I'll take the rest of them and I'll take them up to Patty and she can share them with other people. Because my point is like, there's no need for us to overwork ourselves. Also, if you get overwhelmed, sometimes what I tell people is just go put them out back on the trees outside. Nature knows what to do with them. Actually, what I did, we had the Polyphemus that ended up having a third generation real late last fall. And so I was trying to keep them alive, but I knew I wasn't going to have enough oak leaves. So literally, I took them over to the Ohio Wildlife Center so that they could feed them to any of the birds that they had in their rehab center, so that they wouldn't just be wasted. They'd actually be used for a purpose. Since Polyphemuses eat the oak leaves, that's one of the easier giant silk moths to try. I figure most schools have an oak tree nearby, so I'm trying to figure out how you can make something user-friendly for teachers. I know whenever they did monarchs, they'd have their milkweed patch, and then they go back and find out that, oh my gosh, the golf course mowed down their milkweed. So I figured if you can find something that uses oak leaves, most people know where they've got an oak tree around it. So once again, know your limits. It's one of those ones where you just don't recognize how much they're going to be eating. And you think, oh, we've got enough for them to last. And you come out the next day and they're just on sticks. So it's one of those ones that you can release them out on a tree if you're getting overwhelmed, or call a friend to come help you pick them up. Since they don't have any mouth parts, they may spend 3 to 4 weeks as a caterpillar before they spin their cocoon. Whereas 4 weeks, you've got a butterfly. Here, you've got 4 weeks that you're having to feed a caterpillar. But for the upper grades, and especially like in the high school ecology classes, I think it's important for them to be able to begin to recognize the difference on how nature works with all these different kinds of animals on there. The Cecropias actually will kind of knit some leaves together and spin their silk using the leaves as part of that. And this is what a Cecropia is going to look like. So that's a male. He's got nice big fuzzy antennae. And once again, this is one where he was raised indoors. So when he closed, he's hanging on a little thing that some people use test tubes to go and have their leaves in. So that's what he's working on right there. Some trees and shrubs that are common: oak trees, sweet gum trees, button bushes. Those are 3 that are kind of easy. Like I said, most people do have oak trees. Unfortunately, with oak trees and sweet gum trees, they are a bit of a trash tree. But Doug Tallamy says that as far as it goes, if you can plant an oak tree, they support more caterpillars than any other tree. So if you want to support nature and have food chain for the birds and everybody else on up the food chain, an oak tree is the way to go. If you want to observe moths, you can go and turn on your porch light. But if you want a real picture, you can go and hang it outside with the light shining behind the sheet. And I'll talk about where you can go get somebody that actually does that so that you don't have to do it yourself. Here's another moth that when I was out getting some stuff, I think that's a yellow dagger moth.
Look at these.
Some different resources from Facebook. The Lepidoptera Rearing 101 Ohio is one that I've talked about. Leaves for Wildlife is of a nursery, but they will have all kinds of stuff. She has some really nice big signs up at her nursery that talks about the different types of plants and the different types of caterpillars. She's very, very knowledgeable and can sit there and give you information on what types of plants you can put, even in just a container garden. Caterpillar Identification of North America is a good Facebook. So there you can post a picture of a caterpillar and see if you can find it. I will tell people the woolly bear caterpillars are fine to handle, but if it has hairy things, normally you want to be careful on handling it because sometimes the hairs can irritate or sting. So that's one of those ones that we tell the kids to be careful holding on to caterpillars that are fuzzy. Butterfly Ridge Butterfly Conservation Center Limited is also on Facebook. And there's another caterpillar that we found that we took into the high school for them to look at. This was an Io moth that I raised. This one had stinging hairs, so I was really careful for it, but I was real happy where it managed to survive all the way through to the next year and come out. For those that have hummingbird moth, if you have honeysuckle plants, so it is right here, the head is right there, and then down on its little end, it's got its little horn. So I actually found these last year and I was happy because I know that I'd had the hummingbird moth. So there was another picture where you can see his head and there's his little horn on his rear. And this is what he looks like. So I jokingly call him the duck-billed platypus of the insect moth world because he basically has a head that looks like a hummingbird, and then he's got a fuzzy back, and then often they look like a lobster tail at the end of it. So they're quite fascinating to get. They just are real cute on that. I think he's eating on woodland phlox there. Gypsy moths are also known as spongy moths. We will not raise those. If you see them, then they recommend that you destroy them. You'll often hear NORC around the central Ohio area saying they're going to be spraying for gypsy moths. They do a lot of damage to trees. But if they're going to spray and you've got other host plants, you'll tend to want to cover them so that the poisons that they use don't get on your host plants. This is what a gypsy moth looks like, and this is what the caterpillars are going to look like on the trees and on the leaves for them. So like I said, they're invasive, and most agricultural departments will have a spraying program so that when they start coming out, they'll be going and destroying them so that they do not harm the different crops. Leaves for Wildlife Nursery, owned by Patty Shipley. So here's its address. She's very helpful. She sells native plants and she shears caterpillars and eggs when she has them. The reason why they stress native plants is that the native plants are going to feed the native animals in the area. One of the really invasive plants that you guys see all along roads is called the Callery pear, the Bradford pear. Nothing eats it except the stupid squirrels plant the little fruits all over the place. And after a couple years, it gets like 4-inch thorns on it, and it makes it where you can't even mow the fields anymore. So that's one reason why you try to just focus on native plants. Another resource is Chris Klein. He used to be the person that helped with the butterfly house at Franklin Park Conservatory. What he does on Butterfly Ridge is entirely different, though. He had a family farm that he is now repurposing into natural habitats. So you can go down and take a tour, but it's not going to be like the butterfly house where you walk in and there's all these butterflies in the room. You're going to walk through and you're going to see butterflies out in their natural settings. And he actually keeps track of how many different butterflies and moths he sees. He does a mothing workshop where he'll invite people to come down at night, and he'll set up the great big sheet, and he'll have mercury vapor on one side and infrared on the other to show people all the different moth types. So there is a slight cost to go take a tour down there. But if you guys have like a brownie troop or something like that, I would say it would be a worthwhile trip to go down to see what he's done. or if you've got a school where you guys want to set up a natural pollinator area, he would be a real good resource to have. Here's his website. So it's called Butterfly Ridge. And so that goes and shows you all the different kinds of things that you can look at. He does have a couple books that are very helpful. So A Beginner's Guide to Mothing. So if you look on the part of the cover, you can see where he's got the sheet hung up, and you can see where they're looking at the moths that have been attracted to the light. This is another one, The Complete Guide to Butterfly Gardening and Habitat Creation in the Midwest. So that is where he goes and identifies all the different butterflies and when they're to see and what type of host plants they have. This one, if there was just one resource I was going to have for butterflies in a classroom, any classroom, kindergarten on up, it'd be the life cycles of butterflies. They have real nice detailed where they'll show you what the eggs look like, what the different instarts, what the chrysalis looks like, and what the adults look like. So it's an awesome resource for the different classrooms. Bringing Home Nature is a really good resource if you just want to find out how you can go support wildlife in your area. He bought a house that had very few trees. He just went around sticking acorns in the ground. And when he did, he started seeing more and more birds and more insects coming on there. You can also find his webinars on YouTube. He often does speeches and does presentations, and he's just very knowledgeable. So he's a good resource. Raising Butterflies in the Garden. This is a thick book. It's a really thick book. And like I said, she goes and gives you all kinds of pictures and details and tells you about all the different habitats. So that's one that I always have so that if I'm interested in getting another butterfly to come around my area, I'll go to that to be able to go and check on that. And then just a special thanks to Chris Anderson, Amanda Wolf, and Kylie Baumley for allowing me to access their photos. So, do you guys have any questions?
I don't have a question,
Brain
Michelle, but you are a whiz bang on everything butterflies, I'll say, and moths,
and
because
moth.
you shared
Oh,
more
no,
than I ever imagined.
I'm not even in deep. It's just that I have a curiosity. And like I said, I believe in lifelong learning. So when I retired, I just needed something that I needed to do that I thought was going to be good for the world. And like I said, trying to go and help teachers recognize what they can do. And I was going to say, Kathy, this is going to end up being recorded, but is that going to be posted on our website? And
It'll be posted on our YouTube channel.
So if you know teachers and things like that that might be interested, and like I said, all the way up to high school. If you guys have environmental clubs and they want to look at doing some different things, then this might give them some resources that they'd be able to check out. And like I said, they are fun. If you guys remember A Bug's Life and the caterpillar who kind of sat there and held the thing, that's how these guys eat. Whereas I call the monarchs, I say they're the corn on the cob method, where they'll munch and then they'll come back and they'll munch. But these guys actually will hold it and they'll just kind of munch on into it. So they're just really cute. And like I said, they're supporting the bird population. It's one of those ones where the more we can do to be able to support nature is just beneficial for all of. And planting a tree helps with carbon dioxide, and it also makes your yard a lot cooler. So
Helps too.
Yep. Jean, you're muted. Unmute.
Jean, there's an audio, like a microphone, that you probably have a red line through the bottom of your screen. Still not.
There you go.
Audio.
Yeah.
Okay.
There you go. Yep.
Have you ever heard of a caterpillar that eats human flesh? It it lives in Hawaii. It's a flesh-eating caterpillar.
I have not heard of it, but I do believe that that exists. Yeah.
You can Google it.
Yeah,
Um,
you
my
can
guess
Google
is
it because students do it. They want to find out flesh-eating caterpillars. I know.
yes. Actually, the thing I think of as flesh eating is for my senior fair project, I reconstructed a bunny rabbit skeleton, and I had a hard time getting the rest of the meat off the bones per se. And so the one guy that was the judge told me I needed to take mealworm beetles and put the skeleton in with the mealworm beetles, and they'll clean it off. So
They'll clean it,
anthropologists
Yeah.
that need to clean it. So yeah, but
Oh.
they do that. And there's one caterpillar here, it's called a saddleback, and it's got a pretty green middle and then a brown hole in the middle, and that's why it's called a saddleback. But if you touch it, it's like getting stung by a wasp. So I'm real careful when I see those, and I sit there and go, pretty, but I do not need to find out what that feels like personally. It's like, there's certain life experiences I do not need.
Right.
But like I said, it's just one of those
Okay.
ones. Normally, I don't hold the monarch caterpillars. You can hold the butterflies. People say, oh, you're going to hurt their scales. No, they've got real strong wings. But the Luna moths and the Polyphemus, the females will just kind of crawl on your finger because they're used to holding on, and they're just so soft, and they're just kind of fun. Amanda Wolf, who I had her pictures, she raised them by the hundreds. You would see her, she's just like 5 feet tall, and you'd see her with these big arms carrying these oak branches into her place where she raises the different caterpillars. And she'd sit there and listen to them munching on the leaves and eating them, and it's just kind of a peaceful sound. You can hear the plunk, plunk, plunk of the little frass falling to the floor. Blended Woods, if you're in the central area, they also will do a mothing where they'll have people come out at night and they'll do a hike to go look at the different moths. If you check any of your metro parks or any of your state parks with your naturalists, you can check with them to see whether or not they do any type of butterfly or moth programs. They will probably not share any caterpillars or eggs, mainly because if they do, you get people coming into the parks and start taking everything, and then they're not there. And so that's the reason I'd send people, look on Facebook for people who raise them as hobbies. That's the easiest place, people who know. I suppose you can buy them, but my point is once you know people that raise them, why pay money for caterpillars? It's like I go out in the wild and see if I can find them, or know people that I can find them from.
Michelle, this might sound like a dumb question, but when you say they support the birds, do the birds eat caterpillars?
They feed them to their babies. So even the seed eaters eat it. That is it's a nice, soft, mushy thing that the parents can push down the baby's throats. In fact, I was talking to a naturalist last year because I like to put peanuts out for the blue jays. Squirrels like it too, but she quits kind of mid-season because the parent birds don't recognize that the babies can't handle the big size peanuts. So she's like, if you're going to put peanuts out, chop them up into smaller bits, because otherwise they can actually go and choke the babies for the parents feeding them. But the caterpillars are nice and squishy, and they can just go and get pushed down. Hummingbirds, by the way, do eat insects. Hummingbirds can actually raise their beaks ahead of time. They'll eat a lot of mosquitoes. So when they drink nectars, they're only getting carbohydrates from the hummingbirds. And so that's the reason why they use the caterpillars and the mosquitoes for their protein source, because you need protein to grow muscles and bones.
All right, thank you.
Yep. can you tell my mom was a biology teacher?
Oh, that.
I
that
thought
makes
maybe
sense.
you might have been a biology teacher.
I actually was math in elementary school, but towards the end, I did teach middle school life science. So yeah, it kind of headed that way.
Yeah. I can't think of the last time I saw a moth. I can't even remember one, and I don't think I've seen a caterpillar. Maybe at school, I don't know.
We
I
will
guess
see
I'm
with
not-
the
I was saying,
call on our video, our doorbell has a camera, and then because then we have a porch light, and then you'll see it on the camera.
Okay.
Now, Beth, you bring up a point. Because of all the spraying that people do, because back when you used to go on vacations back in the 60s and 70s, your windshields were just covered with bug guts.
Yeah.
And anymore, that doesn't happen. So you have farmers that try to reduce how much the crops get eaten by insects. And so what they do is they'll use ones that are Roundup ready, that are modified, which will let them spray the crops with Roundup. It won't hurt the plants, but it kills all the caterpillars. And if you kill the caterpillars, then you don't get the adults to go
Yeah.
and get the babies for the next generation.
Hmm.
So there may be a good reason why you do not see as much anymore. And
Right.
if you have to get rid of mosquitoes,
Mhm.
the thing I would tell you to do, so first, if you're having a picnic, don't spray. Just have an oscillating fan because the mosquitoes can't outfly the fan. So rather than going and having to put DEET or anything on you, you can just have the oscillating fan. It feels nice on the guests and it keeps the mosquitoes away. Mosquitoes they need standing water to breed. So Doug Tallamy talks about creating a mosquito bucket where you take a 5-gallon bucket, you fill it with water, you put some straw or grass in it, and then you go to the hardware store and you get what are called mosquito dunks. And they kind of look like a grainy donut. And you put that in your bucket, and it actually contains a bacteria called Bacillus thuringiensis, and it's a subspecies. And it actually will attack the exoskeleton of the mosquito larva in the water. So the mosquitoes can lay their eggs, but the larvae do not have the ability to hatch and become adult mosquitoes. So that is the easiest way if you want to control, besides dumping out standing water, if you want to control mosquitoes in your area. Because I hate to say it, whenever they go spraying through the neighborhoods with the mosquito braids, it does very little to get rid of your mosquitoes because it really doesn't kill the larva in the water. It just kills a few mosquitoes, but it will attack all of your butterflies, your bees, and your other things that you want to be out there in nature. So trying to find ways to teach people how to be smarter to have insect control, but do it in a way so that there's less pesticides and less poisons getting on us and in our environment.
Wow.
Other questions
Oh,
or
so much,
curiosities?
so much information.
Yeah.
If you just want some fun things for butterflies, so if you don't want to do milkweed, eastern black swallowtails, you can get like bronze fennel or plant dill or plant parsley. Often people will get confused with thinking they're monarch butterflies, but they're eastern black swallowtails. So that's a real easy way. They'll eat the carrot tops, and those are really kind of fun to do. They will, they're different because they're chrysalis over winters. So I actually will take theirs. They actually can get their cells to take some of the body fluids and increase the sugar amount, which acts like an antifreeze so that their cells don't freeze over winter. But what we do is I'll take their chrysalis after a hard freeze, and then I put them in a Tupperware container and I stick them in my veggie drawer in the refrigerator. Because if they're indoors and it gets too warm, all of a sudden you've got this butterfly in November and there's nothing for it to eat. So it's basically just going to starve to death. So now I pulled all my butterfly chrysalis out. So I've got swallowtails, I've got spicebush swallowtails, I've got giant swallowtails. So I've got those guys sitting out on a mesh habitat on my porch, and I'll watch for when they come out and then I'll release them. So cabbage whites are the only major butterflies I'm seeing right now. And like I said, we just started seeing the Luna moths come out. Have not seen any Cecropias or Polyphemus yet. So it's a fun time. Right now I've got like 4 different green lights where I'm growing milkweed and all kinds of fun stuff for butterflies and all that. So, but like I said, it's one of those ones that it keeps me out of trouble usually. And it's fun because the kids just enjoy it. They just love watching the different things. And like I said, teaching a kid not to step on a caterpillar is not only important for the kid, it's also important for the caterpillar. So that's how you manage to get it to be nice all the way around.
I think my niece was in I would say 2nd or 3rd grade, and she came home with a jar, and it had I don't know. Anyway, and then it turned into a butterfly, and we all had a good time with it. And she loved it. She really loved it. And
Yeah,
I'm
they
thinking,
do.
yeah, I'm thinking that they bought it somewhere. It was some kind of a kit or something.
Yeah. You can order the painted lady kits, and I think they sell them down at the Franklin Park Conservatory. So a lot of your nature stores will sell the painted lady kit. And that's simply because they come with the pre-made food that the caterpillars can survive on. So you don't have to worry about what am I going to feed these guys.
Right. Yeah, because I can't remember. But she
But it's
loved it.
definitely fun. Oh yeah, they do. And it's nice and simple, and it's not as scary as spiders and stuff like that for kids. So, although we've had kids freak out at the butterflies, there's some people that just do not like butterflies, and it's like, okay, I respect your choice. Whenever we have the kids hold them before we release the monarchs in the fall, I'll tell the kids, now it has claws, and that's just so that it can grip on. It's not going to hurt you like a cat clawing you. And then that way they're ready for it. And then the parents take the pictures and the butterfly flies off and everybody. So we tag the monarchs in the fall to go down to Mexico. They've got numbers on them. And then you report the numbers back to Monarch Watch. And then hopefully you hear that your butterfly was found in the spring with this little number. Often they find them in the winter where the butterflies made it to Mexico, but they died when they were down there. But you still at least know it made it to Mexico.
Right. There was a special on butterflies on CNN this year.
Okay, 60 Minutes just had one a couple weeks ago on monarch butterflies, where
Well, maybe it was.
Anderson
It might have been 60.
Cooper went down and
It was
visited
Anderson
the
Cooper,
sanctuary.
yeah.
Yep. Yeah, we were posting all over. Don't miss it. Don't miss it. You got to
Yeah.
see it. And, yep.
Yeah, it's kind of an
And like I
unusual
said-
thing for the news. It was nice. It wasn't horrible.
Yeah.
You know, it was a nice thing to listen to.
Yeah, you could say, I enjoyed that. That didn't give me any stress.
And I wasn't mad afterwards.
No. It's
Michelle,
like, oh, there's in the world.
Michelle, I have another question.
Yeah.
I've grown butterflies in my classroom when I was teaching, so I know the cost, but all that you do, does that become costly or not?
I jokingly say I'm a dink, which means double income, no kids. I had 150 kids at school, and I got to send them home at night. So since my husband and I both work, we could have hobbies. So I don't have cable TV, but I'll go and buy stuff for butterflies and things like that. And
Okay.
what I've been doing this year is I take some of the plants that I grow and then I trade them for credit for other plants that I can bring back to use to raise the caterpillars. So it's no more expensive than the persons that have the flower gardens and go to the garden center. And a joke goes, you never can have too many plants. In fact, I just got some vermilion firecracker plants. They have nice little red flowers that the hummingbirds love. I haven't
Ah.
seen them yet. I thought I got buzzed by one, but they have seen them in Ohio, and they're reporting the monarchs are coming out a little earlier than they did last year. Last year was a late year for the monarchs. Usually I tell Central Ohio by the 4th of July week. They didn't make it until the week after the 4th of July. But yep,
Okay.
they have all kinds of fun. So, and like I said, they're good for grandkids too. It's like just sit there and you can grow a swamp milkweed real easily in a potted plant on your patio. So if it's one of those ones where you don't have a big garden area, you can do that. When we gave the kids research projects for the seniors the first year in the high school, they had to research milkweed. They thought it was really boring. Well, there's one type of milkweed that's not native to Ohio, but it grows really well in pots. We call it balloon milkweed because that's a nice, safe name, but it's also known as hairy balls milkweed because the seed pods kind of look like spiky plums. And I'll tell you, those high school boys were so
Yeah, I bet.
excited to tell their class that there was a milkweed called hairy balls. And yep, and everybody got the giggle. So,
Oh, yeah.
yeah. So I grow it, but we call it balloon milkweed so that we don't have to worry about having the giggles too much in that situation.
That's cute. Yeah.
Well,
I
I
wanted
hope
to
you
show
guys
you.
go ahead.
Go ahead. Go
Well, I was
ahead.
going to say, I hope you guys learned stuff and I hope it wasn't overwhelming because it's a situation where I always have tons of information, but it's a situation where hopefully that you can break it down into small parts and pick up just a little bit. So
Right.
Beth, what do you want to say?
I wanted to show you that I have something bug related. And I found it on Saturday. And I thought it was so cute. Isn't it adorable? And
Cute.
is that the cutest thing? It's going to go in our silent auction.
It's
So
cute.
none of you tell anybody. It's supposed to be a secret.
Let me grab something real quick. When I work with people, I believe in models. So are you guys familiar with the compression stockings that you get after you've had knee replacements?
Oh yeah.
Right.
Okay. So I took one of those and I sewed it and I stuffed it and I painted it to make it look like a monarch butterfly. So
Oh.
this I do not let the kids handle. Now, you see the things that look like the sporty sunglasses? That's the hind end. So the one that has the triangle, that's its real head. So I often ask the kids, can you tell me why it would have a benefit of it? Because it actually has little antennae on both hands. The longer ones are on the head. But often when you see a caterpillar out there, you'll see the butt end being up there. So I'll have the kids do some predictions on, well, why would they look like it has two heads? Well, ideally, it's going to try to grab the head and then the caterpillar hopefully can get away. But yeah, there's times where you find all the different things. I'll take pom-poms and glue them together for the kids to learn to look at so they can see the two different the head and the rear end. But the kids like to pull the pom-poms apart. So my fun is taking string to go through so that I can make it a little bit stronger so that the kids don't pull it apart because they'll pull it apart and I'm like, Oh, gee, thanks, kids. But yeah, I think models work with the kids, for them to understand on
yeah.
that. So
I'm glad
once
you
a
said you painted that because I have never seen compression socks look like that. Can you
Yeah, but
imagine?
wouldn't it be fun to wear them if they did?
They might be more popular.
Oh.
I'm sure somewhere you probably can get knee socks that have